I have lots of ghost stories, personal experience with ghosts, and it didn't really matter, seems, whether I was in Texas or New Mexico or Montana. I never really lived in a house that wasn't haunted. I have some really intense stories about ghosts, and I have a propensity, it seems, to have these experiences, as do other people in my family. Some, but not all. And it's almost gotten to a point where you can tell who's more kind of tuned in. I don't want to say susceptible, but tuned in to that the wavelength. And you know, over time I'll tell some other kinds of stories. So it's not just ghost stories that I seem to have a proclivity towards, and over time that'll become more apparent. But one of my favorite stories is, there are three stories that or four that really just freaked me out. The first one I'll tell is I was 17, so it was probably 1983, and I drove one night, must have been a weekend night, with my brother, who's 10 years older, to Oklahoma from Fort Worth, Texas, which is where I'm from. And we drove over the border into Oklahoma. We were drinking beer. That was kind of the idea, was to drive and drink a bunch of beer called Texas Pride. It was $1.65 a six-pack, I remember. And we were doing I worked part-time construction and went to school. So we drove onto an Indian reservation, and it was almost like on the road that we got onto, there was no choice. It just said, now entering the reservation, and I don't remember which one. I could probably figure it out. But we drove on, and we'd been driving for hours, so we needed to piss. And I remember, okay, so we pulled over, we got out of the truck, we're on either side of the truck, and there was a full moon, I remember, and there was just there was a big sloping hill off, sort of to the left, and then nothing else, just flat land. And all of a sudden we started hearing hoofbeats, horses, and they were coming down. They were coming over the hill, actually, and then down towards us. And it wasn't a few horses, it was a lot of horses, and accompanied by these hoofbeats were cries, like whoops, and lots of them. So we can hear all of these horses and all of these whoops, which start to sound really kind of angry, and they're coming right at us. The thing is, there's a full moon, and we can see the top of the hill and everything on the side of the hill, and there's nothing there. But the sound is just getting louder and louder, and they're coming right at us and then surrounded us. So loud that I can hear the snorts of these horses, and we can hear these Indians, right? But we can't see anything. That didn't make it less horrifying. It was totally, totally horrifying. And we felt that we both were so creeped out. First of all, because you can't see them, but you can hear them. but also because they're war cries, right? We both could tell that, and there was just, so we were pissing, and we both got back into the truck, still pissing. We both pissed ourselves. I can't really translate to you how scary this was. It was you know, the creep factor was creep factor 10, right? So we're both still pissing, and he's trying to get the truck started, and we got off that reservation as fast as we possibly could. That experience is one. And see, here's the thing. I have these kind of experiences more often with certain members of my family, which tells me something. You know, the feeling was that this tribe was coming for us. Now, we were the only two people there, so that sounds kind of silly, but it seemed personal. It seemed personal, and it seemed that they had the intent to kill us. We both felt that and talked about it later. It was impossible. It was, you know, interdimensional. And these spirits were defending their land from white guys, these two white guys from Texas, you know. And I come from Fort Worth, where everybody wears a cowboy hat, and there's definitely kind of a thing. And I'm sure my brother had on a cowboy hat. I probably didn't at the time, but I know he always wore one, so I'm sure he was wearing one. Not that should have signified anything. This was spiritual, right? So they were responding to us as invaders, or something like that. You know, we came onto their land. You know, you know, I'm sure when I first started to tell the story, people were like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Indian burial ground? Come on." You know, it sounds so hokey, right? Well, let me tell you something. We didn't have any plan or idea that anything was going to happen on an Indian reservation in Oklahoma that night. Zero. This just happened. And I've experienced other things on other Indian reservations, because I've been on a lot of them. This wasn't the only thing to happen on a reservation. So, you know, I have, and I'll tell some of that later. Some of it, you know, Indians have secrets. Native Americans have secrets that they'd rather not convey to the world, right? And, you know, I'm sure everyone listening is aware of the ghost dance, the snake dance, the buffalo dance. These dances are not, it's not just for kicks. They're not doing that. The ghost dance and the snake dance were outlawed by the U.S. government for a reason. And the Native American tribes do not convey that reason, and neither does the U.S. government. But trust me when I tell you, it's for a reason. It's for a reason. I just made up that word. That's a good one, right? So it's, you know, and it's kind of like white people or people of that day, or however you want to think about it, took so much from the Native Americans, and so that their religion, their spiritual practices are so sacred to them. It's surprising to me that we even know about the snake dance, the ghost dance. You can go to New Mexico and see the buffalo dance at the Hopi reservation in northern New Mexico. But the other two are still secret, guarded, not for the public, not even for people who are outside the tribes, as far as I understand it. So that particular story, and it's not a story, this actually happened. I don't make things up. It is for people who don't believe in a spiritual universe. You don't believe in ghosts. You don't believe that these visitors are visiting. That's your choice, and that's your prerogative, and you're right. But I'm here to tell you, for some of us, this stuff happens, and it's as real as anything else. I have several more good stories. I'll be back right after this. This next one, this is the most intense story. I was getting married to my first wife in New Mexico, in Taos, New Mexico, and we lived at a place called Martinez Hacienda. It's a very famous place now. It's the oldest building in Taos, and it had about, I guess, 8 or 9 apartments, and it was a hacienda, so the apartments surrounded a fountain. And so we were getting married, and we had asked Mr. Martinez, who was the great-great-grandson of the person who built it or something, maybe great-great-great, who knows, old. It was an old building. And I saw the photographs 360 degrees where there was nothing in Taos, New Mexico except that building. But we had asked if we could rent some of the apartments for the wedding, for our family coming in, and he said, no, you can't. So we went out. Okay, so my ex-wife and I, we were getting married. We had stayed up all night getting ready for the wedding, and we went out to light candles. We had bought these candles that are 4 feet high and really big around, and there were lots of them, and we had to light them before we went in and put the finishing touches on ourselves. And so we lit the candles, and we said a prayer. The sun hadn't come up yet. We were getting married at sunrise. As a matter of fact, a lot of people showed up in their pajamas. That's Taos, okay? Very hippie kind of, or I don't know. Yeah, not hippie-ish, but although there are still a lot of hippies there, it was just kind of a very loose community. So we had said a prayer, and I turned around, and in the apartment closest to us, this window opens up, and this old man was just watching us. And we actually, he was just staring at us in a very kind of, he had a frown on his face, and it wasn't very friendly at all. And so I said to him, people are going to show up in the next 15 minutes, and we're getting married. And no response from the old man. And so I said, you know, it is a wedding ceremony, so when the people show up, do you mind just kind of closing the window? It was one of these windows that you throw open. And would you mind closing the window and just letting us do our ceremony. And still, the guy doesn't say anything. He just is staring at us in this very irritating way, I have to say. So, at this point, we're getting a little bit pissed off and anxious because the minutes are ticking. And we've still got to go in. She's still got to get her whatever she was wearing. She had to get her hair and her shoes and the whole thing, right? And just no response and no closing the window and no nothing. So we walk up, and I think at this point she said something to the effect of, "You're being kind of rude." Still no response. He's just staring at us. And then I tried to get some kind of response out of this guy, and nothing, right? So we finally just have to split. We have to go back into our own place, get ready. We come back, and the window's closed, and so we figure, okay, so he closed the window. When the ceremony started, a wind came up out of nowhere, and very rare occurrence. This wind came up, and it started this kind of perfect, it was blowing seemingly like this, in a, I don't know, tornado effect up in the sky. And a bunch of crows flew up into the sky, and they started circling in a perfect circle. And then from that circle, it started to rain. Amazing. Totally amazing. And really, just, it's supposed to be a good omen if it rains on your wedding. But it seemed to me that the rain was coming out of this circle of crows that were flying. Anyway, we had our ceremony, and we had our reception at the hacienda too. So we got married, and everything happened there. There was no off-site anything. So Mr. Martinez is there for the wedding, and I went up to him. I'd been up all night, and everything's so weird. I just got married. This rain, but I said to him, I said, you told us that we couldn't rent any apartments, but then you have somebody come and stay in that apartment, and it just feels kind of weird, feels kind of scratchy, And he said, well, wait a minute, tell me about this old man. What are you talking about? I said, well, I described him in detail, and I remember. One thing I remembered, he had on a checkered shirt. It was a green checkered short sleeve shirt, which kind of stood out to me. It was kind of an old-timey green short sleeve shirt. So he says, come with me. He goes and gets a key, and he opens that apartment. And he pushes open the door, and the first thing I see on the floor is dust that is over an inch high. And when he pushes the door, there's a sweep of where that dust has been pushed out of the way. And there was dust on everything, like really thick. He said, listen, no one's in this apartment, but my father died in this room in 1955. And we haven't opened this room since the day he died in 1955. And he died, I was there, says Mr. Martinez, wearing a green and white checkered short sleeve shirt. He said, that's the window that you say was open? Go open it. And I stepped in there, and it was like walking on the moon because the dust was so thick. It felt like walking on the moon. Not that I've walked on the moon. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. But, and he says, wait a minute, and he hands me a pocket knife. He says, you're going to need this. And I go and I try to open the window, and I can see that it's painted shut. He said, go ahead and cut it open. Go ahead and cut. And I tried, and it was just completely sealed. And he said, cut through the paint, because I want you to see, that it's painted shut. There's no way. I ended up going outside and cutting through that paint, and the house had been painted so many times since 1955 that you could see like 8 or 10 layers of paint of different colors. So the thing about this story is that about 8 years ago, my sister sent me a link. She knew about the story. She was there at the wedding. They had made a film about this old Mr. Martinez following girls home on that road. And it had happened to enough young girls that they made a film about it, and it was widely distributed on the web, and I think it went to film festivals where they tried to find the ghost of old Mr. Martinez. Since then, in the day of paranormal, they've had lots and lots of... See, now the place is a museum. Even the place where I lived, it's all a museum. Old Martinez Hall, Martinez Hacienda. Old Martinez Hall is one thing. Martinez Hacienda is now a museum, and they have allowed ghost hunters in to do, recording and TV shows and all that kind of thing. But we weren't the only ones to see old Mr. Martinez, and now it's a big thing around northern New Mexico. Everybody knows. So that's the only time that I've talked directly. Oh, and by the way, there was no way to tell that this wasn't a person. Looked just like a person. There was a light on in the room. He looked just like... we were 5 feet away. No way to tell. It wasn't translucent or transparent or anything like that. Didn't say bleh, no ghosty bullshit. It just looked like a human being, just like a man, and apparently like Mr. Martinez. I think he showed us pictures of him too later on, and it was who we had seen. The pictures were black and white, and it was just one of the weirdest things. And the other thing was that my family was weirded out, that I was weirded out on my wedding day about a ghost, because now I started talking about it and people are listening and hearing about it on our wedding day. But, very, very intense. I wouldn't say creepy. The crow thing in the rain was creepy. Now that was creepy. Maybe it was a blessing. But a number of things have happened in the house that I'm in now, in Montana, and the scariest one for me was I used to paint paintings in my basement, and I would stay up all night after my family would go to bed. I would stay up and I would paint till about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd come up. And I would usually be so hungry I would eat dinner again, and then I would take my dogs for a walk, and then by that time it would be time for everybody to get up and go to school. So I was down in my basement. It was probably about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I hope my daughter doesn't watch this because things still happen in this house a lot. But this one was, forget about it. This is the most afraid I ever got. Freaked out, man. I was down there painting, and I got the feeling that there was a ghost in the room with me. And how I felt that, I don't know. But suddenly I just felt something in the room, which happens to me, and so I had some experience with it, and I just was looking around, And I said out loud, if anyone is here with me, make a noise. And I was going to continue to finish my sentence, but I didn't get a chance to. As soon as I said, make a noise, I felt there's a concrete floor, and I felt and heard, well, okay, so the sound of like a sledgehammer hitting concrete was the sound. And the feeling was something right behind my right heel. And I felt, well, it felt like a sledgehammer right behind my heel, and it went right through my foot, you know, the reverberation. And I literally jumped about 3 feet. And it was so loud too, the smack, the crack. And, you know, I was painting, so the place was lit up. I had you know, lights, those kind of lights you get at Home Depot, everywhere, so I could see color and see my paintings and everything. So it was, you know, brightly lit. But of course, I looked around. There was nothing in the room with me that I could see. But this thing had done this smack, and I jumped, and I tried to play it cool. I tried to just kind of stay in my skin and just kind of try to figure out who and what this was. And so I lasted for about 5 minutes. And at about the 5-minute mark, I looked at my hands, and they were shaking so bad, and I was just horrified at what had happened. Because although I had experience with spirits before, this one creeped me out. The door, man. And I just remember, okay, so I started running. You know, I started walking, just slightly walking, and then that became a run, and that became just me almost just flying up the stairs out of the basement. I left all the lights on. I couldn't go back down there. And I don't even think I went back down there I didn't go back down for a full 24 hours. I finally went down there maybe, you know, during the daytime, not that next day, but the day after that. I didn't want anything to do with that place. Another thing that happened down there was after my dad died. And this is very personal, so, you know, but I'm going to go ahead and tell it. After my dad died, so the first thing that happened was, it sounded like someone, it was about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I was lying in bed with my wife, and it sounded like someone started hammering on the wall that leads, you know, that's outside of our bedroom. But I recognized the pattern of the hammering. My dad. And I came around and looked. You can see out the kitchen window onto the wall that I'm talking about. Nobody there, but the sound of the hammering remains. It keeps, you know, it's there. So, anyway, during that same time period, okay, so when my dad died, we handed out some, like a photo of him, and there was an inscription or something on it, but there was just, he had said something. He had said "Forever England," which I think is a quote from a Robert Frost poem, or it's somebody, I don't know, Tennyson, somebody. "Forever England," right? So I was downstairs, and I had one of those. I had my computer down there, and I had that software that was it's voice to text, and I had it going, and someone called me upstairs, and this was right after he died. It was the same week, and I came upstairs, but I left the software going, right? And I go down, and there's like a paragraph there. And it said something like, you will art for art's sake, for art. And I'm an artist. He was an artist too. And it went on about art. And I do have the quote somewhere, but it went on. And then the words, forever England. Man. You know, and as I say, that's very personal to me. I felt like it was an encouragement to be, you know, from my father to say, you know, carry on because my grandfather was an artist, my dad was an artist, I'm an artist. Carry on the legacy, you know. But the forever England part just was too much, you know. It was like, it was so clear. And here's the thing is, something had spoken into that microphone while I was gone. You know, someone. It was my dad. While I was gone, and then when I got back down there it was. You know, there's a lot of things happen in this house, which was actually built the year I was born, 1965. But a lot of things happen. Usually, my daughter and I are the ones to experience it. And again, she's going to watch this, so I don't want to creep her out anymore or feed that, even though we got the shine to us, you know? Got the shine to us, you know? Yeah. So, and, you know, there are times when I've looked at and seen something, and she has seen the same thing, and she says, "Do you see that?" And I say, "What are you talking about?" Because my wife had talked me into not promoting this kind of thing with her. Now, it's just what it is, right? Yeah, but we've had people over to the house who say, you know, one woman came over and said, "Hey, I'm a ghost whisperer, you know. That's what I do in my other job. And there are ghosts in this house. You know that, right?" Tells my wife, and my wife didn't like to talk about it at the time. But, you know, she said, you know, most of the activities downstairs in that basement, which I had redone. But the last thing that happened down there was I was down there making some music. I redid the basement, made a music studio and a bedroom, and I built another studio for painting. And I was down there, and I had put shelves on the wall that are drilled in with these real long lag bolts that go into the concrete, you know. And I was making music down there, and just all of a sudden, just this cacophony, and I turn around, and one of the shelves that I'd put in was just ripped out of the concrete. And these are big, long lag bolts way into the concrete, and it was just ripped out. And I ran out of there that day too, and I really have never been down there to make. If I want to make music, I do it upstairs. I don't go down there anymore because it's freaking haunted, and it's, even for me, you know, even though I'm used to it, it's scary, you know. This is another New Mexico ghost story that happened at the home of an artist named Willie Wood, who probably still lives there. Or maybe she doesn't, I don't know. But I think so. Well, the thing was, I was younger. I wasn't married. I had just started dating a girl. This would have been about 1991, early 1991. And she was house sitting for Willie Wood, right? So, and with another good friend of mine who was also, well, we were all artists, right? So, I remember they each had a bedroom in this house in the upstairs, and you know, I had just started dating this girl, so I was kind of hanging out there. I don't think I was sleeping in that room. I might have been, but I don't think so. So I went out till about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they had both been gone to bed, and I come in at 3 o'clock, and I had just come in when both of them come out of their rooms and said, the one friend of mine who I wasn't dating was going through a divorce, and she said, "Where did John go?" And I said, I didn't see anyone. And almost instantaneously, the other girl who I had just started dating said, "Why did you get up and run out?" And I said, I just walked in the door. I said, "I didn't get up and run out." And she said, and they were both adamant, like, the one girl had seen John, and this other person had seen me. And they both told very similar stories. That, in the one case John, in the other case me, had gone in and sat down on the bed and had a long half-hour conversation, and then suddenly became startled and got up and ran out of the room. And so obviously we figured out, okay, I wasn't even there. John definitely wasn't there. These were apparitions. This was the first night that we had all house sat for Willie Wood, right? Next morning, 7:30 in the morning, a call comes in from Willie Wood. And she says, Willie Wood is a woman. She said, "I forgot to tell you, there are poltergeists in the house, and you're almost definitely going to have something happen." And she said, a woman and her son, her 7-year-old son, died in a fire in the house. She said, "That's how I was able to buy it. It was half burnt down when I bought it, and I got it for a song, and that's how I even have a house, because otherwise I couldn't afford it." And so I think we stayed one more night, and then and then Willie Wood called back and told some of the things that had happened to her. And some of the time, this poltergeist stuff that was happening wasn't that cool. It wasn't, like, there was nothing wrong with them going in and pretending to be these girls' significant others. There's nothing wrong with that. It didn't hurt anybody. It wasn't that scary, really. But she said sometimes it is. Sometimes, you know, you might see someone or hear songs that, or a lot of laughing that's particularly scary. Oh, and things flying around the kitchen and that kind of thing. So And then I can't remember what happened, but one of them had something happen in the kitchen. And I think it was something that flew across the room. And so we left the house and didn't end up house sitting after all. But New Mexico is definitely, you know, there, and Texas, and I mean, I guess all states have these things that happen, but New Mexico in particular is a haunted place. They call it the land of enchantment, and you know, it's enchanted, right? It's enchanted, all right. I remember going to rent a house one time, and it was this big, old, beautiful adobe house, half adobe, but the second story was wood, and it was a really big house, beautiful, on a river, you know, and it was like, even then, let's say, I think it was like $300 a month, which for that area is nothing. In LA, I would have been paying 15 or 16 or 2,000 back then, right, for a house like this, and so it was $300, and it just didn't comport. Like, what is going on? What about this are we not getting? And so my first wife and I, you know, agree, of course we'll take it, you know, and then the woman says, whose name was like, you know, Martinez or Anglada, or, you know, it was old Hispanic family, and she said, there is one thing, my mother lives under the stairs, and it, you know, she brought, and it was the cutest kitchen too, you should see, but she took us over to the stairs which led down into this kitchen, and there's a door, and you know, it's one of those, it's for storage, right? It's, you know, but small door leading under the stairs. But I looked in there and I thought about us, and she said, my mother, she definitely lives under the stairs, and she comes into the kitchen, and you're gonna see things happen. Like, she does move stuff, and if she doesn't like you, and that's why the rent was so low, because people had moved in and then moved right out because they didn't like what was going on, because the mother didn't like them. And she said there have been instances where she does things with knives and that kind of thing, but you know, it just depends. She might like you and then nothing bad will happen. And having experienced enough of this kind of thing, I knew that the woman was not bullshitting us at all, that her mother really did live under the stairs, and that we really were going to have experiences. And we had lived at Martinez Hacienda, and had the ghost there. There was also a 12-year-old boy that I didn't tell you about in that house, but that other people had experiences with at Martinez Hacienda. But we'd already been through it, and so when she told us this, we just politely bowed out of the situation right then. Didn't want to live in a haunted house anymore, you know. Oddly enough, that's all I've ever lived in is haunted houses. I did live in a really old house in Los Angeles on Mount Washington, and I don't remember a lot of ghosty stuff happened there. I don't remember anything happened in that house. But I lived in an old house in San Francisco. That place was freaky. I mean, that place was dripping with spiritual energy and weirdism, and you know, sounds, footsteps. The house I grew up in Texas, the footsteps upstairs just never stopped. Literally, it was all the time. So, But New Mexico, the odds of ending up in a truly haunted house in New Mexico are pretty high. I mean, unless it's a brand new house in Albuquerque or something weird like that. But even so, I don't think it matters how old the house is either. Obviously, people live in apartments and all kinds of... Oh, Mexico is the weird one. I should tell... Tomorrow I'm going to tell a story about a haunted apartment in Mexico. We went down for vacation, and that apartment was so freaking haunted. Wait, I'll tell you that. That'll be the first story I tell tomorrow. That place was so haunted, it was ridiculous. I'll tell you tomorrow. Yeah. That was down in Sayulita, Mexico. Completely haunted. Without a doubt.